The fastest way to shatter a narcissist's ego is not revenge, yelling, or proving them wrong. The real weapon is something far more damaging to them: your emotional independence. Because when you stop feeding their ego, stop reacting to their games, and begin living outside their control, the very foundation of their power starts to crack. And before we go deeper, if you are learning to recognize narcissistic manipulation and take your power back, make sure to like the video and subscribe, because understanding these patterns can completely change how you protect your peace and your self-worth. Now let's begin with the first and most powerful move. The first way to dismantle a narcissist's ego is to stop reacting emotionally to their provocations. This may sound simple, but it is one of the strongest psychological shifts you can make. Narcissists are deeply dependent on emotional reactions from others. Your anger, frustration, tears, and attempts to defend yourself all act like fuel that keeps their inflated ego alive. When they provoke you, criticize you, or twist your words, they are not always searching for resolution. They are searching for a reaction. That reaction reassures them that they still have power over your emotions. When you stop giving them that reaction, something very uncomfortable begins to happen for them. The control they once felt starts to slip away. Imagine a person pressing buttons on a machine that used to light up and make noise, but suddenly nothing happens. They press harder, faster, more aggressively, trying to force the response they are used to. This is often what happens when you become emotionally neutral. The narcissist may escalate their behavior at first. They might become louder, more insulting, or even start playing the victim. This escalation is not strength, it is desperation. Emotional detachment does not mean you hide your feelings or pretend you are unaffected. It means you stop displaying those feelings in front of the person who weaponizes them against you. Your calm responses, short answers, and refusal to engage in heated arguments remove the emotional payoff they depend on. Over time, the narcissist begins to realize that their usual tactics no longer work. The drama they try to create falls flat because you are no longer participating in the emotional game they designed. The second way to dismantle a narcissist's ego is by setting firm boundaries and refusing to constantly justify them. Boundaries are extremely threatening to a narcissist because they interrupt the control they expect to have over you. Narcissists often operate under the assumption that other people's time, attention, and emotional energy belong to them. They expect you to explain yourself, defend your decisions, and eventually bend under pressure. When you start saying no and truly mean it, their sense of entitlement begins to feel challenged. What makes this strategy so powerful is not only setting the boundary, but refusing to turn it into a long discussion. Narcissists are masters of exhausting conversations. If you say you cannot do something, they may question you, criticize you, guilt trip you, or twist the situation until you feel like you must explain yourself again and again. The moment you begin explaining excessively, the dynamic shifts back into their control. They begin searching for loopholes, weaknesses, or emotional triggers in your explanation. A strong boundary is simple and calm. It does not require a long defense. Instead of saying, "I cannot do this because I am really busy and I already promised someone else and I feel overwhelmed," a firm boundary sounds more like, "I am not available for that." When the narcissist pushes again, the response stays the same: calm, brief, and consistent. At first, the narcissist may react with frustration, anger, or ridicule. They might accuse you of being selfish or difficult, But what is actually happening is that their expectation of unlimited access to you is being challenged. Each time you maintain the boundary without apologizing or over explaining, you weaken the illusion that they can control your decisions and manipulate your time. The third way to dismantle a narcissist's ego is to withdraw the constant validation and praise they quietly depend on. Narcissists build their self-image on external admiration. Compliments, approval, and reassurance act like psychological oxygen for them. Many people around them unknowingly become suppliers of this validation, constantly affirming their intelligence, their success, their attractiveness, or their superiority. Over time, the narcissist begins to expect this admiration as something automatic. When that validation suddenly disappears, it creates a powerful disruption in their ego structure. Without that steady stream of praise, they begin to feel something they try very hard to avoid: self-doubt. Narcissists often appear extremely confident, but that confidence is usually fragile and dependent on how others reflect them. When you stop feeding that reflection, their carefully maintained self-image begins to feel unstable. This does not mean you become rude or intentionally insulting. The shift is much quieter than that. Instead of constantly applauding their achievements or exaggerating their importance, you simply stop playing the role of their admirer. Your responses become neutral instead of enthusiastic. When they brag, you acknowledge it briefly without adding admiration or excitement. The emotional boost they once received from your reactions slowly fades. At first, the narcissist may try to pull the validation back out of you. They might brag more loudly, fish for compliments, or create situations where they expect praise. Sometimes they may even criticize you, hoping you will defend yourself and then return to praising them to restore the peace. But when that validation still does not appear, the dynamic begins to shift in a way that deeply unsettles their ego and their sense of importance. The fourth way to dismantle a narcissist's ego is by calmly exposing their manipulation instead of getting pulled into emotional arguments. Narcissists often rely on confusion, emotional chaos, and psychological tactics like gaslighting to maintain control. When they twist facts, deny things they clearly said, or shift blame onto you, the goal is not truth. The goal is to destabilize you so that you begin questioning your own memory, your own perception, and eventually your own confidence. Most people react to this by arguing intensely. They try to prove the narcissist wrong, bring up past conversations, show evidence, or demand accountability. But this often backfires because narcissists thrive inside arguments. The louder the fight becomes, the more the focus moves away from their behavior and toward the emotional chaos they just created. Calmly calling out manipulation removes that chaos. When you respond in a steady, matter-of-fact way, you interrupt the psychological game they are trying to play. For example, if they deny something obvious, instead of getting angry or trying to convince them for 20 minutes, you might simply say, "That is not what happened, and you know it." Then you stop engaging further. No emotional explosion and no long debate. This calm exposure is deeply uncomfortable for a narcissist because it shines light on the tactics they prefer to keep hidden. They depend on you being confused, emotional, or defensive. When you remain clear, steady, and emotionally controlled, their manipulation loses its effectiveness. Often they will try to escalate. When this happens, they may mock you, accuse you of being dramatic, or attempt to change the subject entirely. These reactions are attempts to regain control of the narrative. But every time you calmly recognize and name the manipulation without getting dragged into the drama, you weaken the illusion of power they rely on. The fifth way to dismantle a narcissist's ego is by prioritizing your independence and self-respect. Narcissists feel powerful when they believe someone depends on them emotionally, socially, or psychologically. The more they think you need them for approval, stability, or happiness, the stronger their ego becomes. Your dependence feeds their belief that they are superior, indispensable, and in control of your world. When you begin building a life that does not revolve around them, that illusion starts to break. Independence sends a quiet but powerful message. Your identity, confidence, and happiness are not tied to their approval. This shift is extremely unsettling for a narcissist because it removes the pedestal they expect to stand on. Independence shows up in small but meaningful ways. You make decisions without seeking their validation. You invest in your own friendships, interests, and goals. Your emotional stability no longer depends on whether they praise you, criticize you, or ignore you. When something good happens in your life, you celebrate it without needing their recognition. And when they try to belittle your achievements, it no longer shakes your confidence the way it once did. At first, the narcissist may try to pull you back into dependence. They might criticize your choices, mock your interests, or attempt to make you feel guilty for focusing on yourself. Sometimes they may even pretend to be supportive for a moment, hoping you will return to the dynamic where their approval feels important. But the more you stand firmly in your own self-respect, the less influence their opinions hold. A narcissist's ego thrives on the belief that they are the center of someone else's emotional universe. When they realize that you are fully capable of standing on your own, that sense of central importance begins to crumble. The sixth way to dismantle a narcissist's ego is by refusing to participate in their drama cycles. Narcissists often create emotional storms on purpose. They provoke arguments, create misunderstandings, bring up old conflicts, or suddenly accuse you of things that make no sense. To someone on the outside, it can look chaotic and exhausting. But for the narcissist, this drama serves a purpose. It keeps attention focused on them and keeps you emotionally entangled in their world. Drama is one of the main ways narcissists maintain control. When you are busy defending yourself, arguing, explaining, or trying to calm the situation, your energy becomes completely tied to them. The more emotional the conflict becomes, the more powerful they feel because they can see how deeply they are affecting you. Refusing to participate breaks this cycle in a way that deeply unsettles them. Instead of reacting to every accusation or jumping into every argument, you begin stepping back. When they attempt to start a conflict, you respond briefly and calmly, or sometimes you do not respond at all. You do not chase every misunderstanding, and you do not feel the need to correct every false claim they make. At first, this lack of engagement can make the narcissist intensify their behavior. They may become louder, more dramatic, or even attempt to provoke jealousy, guilt, or fear just to pull you back into the emotional storm. But when those attempts still fail to get the reaction they want, the drama loses its purpose. Without someone to argue with or emotionally manipulate, the narcissist's cycle of chaos begins to collapse. The stage they once used to perform their power becomes empty, and the control they believed they had over your emotional world slowly fades away. The seventh way to dismantle a narcissist's ego is by staying emotionally detached when they try to provoke you. Narcissists are highly skilled at identifying emotional triggers. Over time, they learn exactly which words, accusations, or behaviors will make you feel hurt, angry, guilty, or defensive. Once they discover those triggers, they often use them deliberately to pull you back into emotional reactions that give them a sense of control. When a narcissist provokes you, the reaction is usually the real goal. They may insult you, question your character, accuse you of things you did not do, or suddenly act cold and dismissive. The purpose of these actions is to make you react in a way that proves they still have emotional power over you. The moment you explode in anger, break down in tears, or desperately try to defend yourself, they receive confirmation that they can still influence your emotional state. Emotional detachment interrupts that pattern. Instead of reacting impulsively, you begin responding with calm, controlled energy. Your tone stays steady, your responses stay brief, and sometimes you choose silence instead of engagement. This does not mean you agree with what they say or accept their accusations. It simply means you refuse to allow their provocations to dictate your emotional state. This shift can be incredibly frustrating for a narcissist. They expect their words to cause a reaction, and when that reaction does not come, they begin to feel the loss of control. Often they will escalate their attempts, becoming more insulting or more dramatic in an effort to break your composure. But the more consistently you remain emotionally detached, the more the narcissist realizes that their ability to manipulate your feelings is weakening. The emotional strings they once pulled so easily begin to loosen, and the control they depended on slowly slips away. The eighth way to dismantle a narcissist's ego is by walking away and removing access to your attention. For a narcissist, attention is one of the most valuable forms of power. It does not even have to be positive attention. Arguments, emotional conversations, defending yourself, and trying to fix the relationship all keep them at the center of your mental and emotional world. As long as you remain focused on them, they still feel important and influential. Walking away changes that dynamic completely. When you stop giving them regular access to your time, your thoughts, and your emotional energy, the source of their influence begins to disappear. This is extremely threatening to a narcissist because their ego often depends on knowing that they still occupy space in someone's life. Walking away does not always mean a dramatic exit or confrontation. Sometimes it happens quietly. You stop engaging in unnecessary conversations. You reduce contact. You stop responding to every message, every complaint, and every attempt to pull you into conflict. Your life gradually becomes centered on your own priorities rather than on managing their behavior. At first, the narcissist may react strongly to this shift. They might attempt to pull you back with guilt promises of change, sudden kindness, or even anger. Some may try to provoke you just to get a reaction that confirms you are still emotionally connected to them. These reactions are often attempts to regain the attention they feel slipping away. But when your distance remains consistent, something important begins to happen. The narcissist starts to realize that they no longer have the same level of access to your emotional world. Without that access, the sense of control they once relied on starts to weaken, and their inflated sense of importance loses its audience. In the end, dismantling a narcissist's ego is not about revenge, cruelty, or trying to outplay them in their own psychological games. The real shift happens when you stop feeding the very things their ego depends on: your reactions, your validation, your attention, and your emotional availability. A narcissist's power often survives because the people around them unknowingly keep supporting the illusion they have built around themselves. When you stop reacting to provocations, hold firm boundaries, withdraw constant praise, Calmly recognize manipulation, strengthen your independence, refuse drama, stay emotionally detached, and limit their access to your attention. Something powerful begins to happen. The dynamic changes. The control they once felt over your emotions begins to fade, and the ego they carefully protected starts to lose its support system. What makes these strategies so effective is that they are not about fighting the narcissist. They are about reclaiming your own stability and self respect instead of being pulled into endless arguments or emotional battles. You shift your focus toward protecting your peace and maintaining clarity. And that is the truth many people discover too late. The moment you stop playing the role the narcissist assigned to you, their influence over your life begins to collapse. Their ego can only survive when someone continues to feed it. Your calm, your boundaries, and your independence become the quiet forces that slowly take that power away.